My name's Noah Everett. I'm 35, and until a few months ago, I thought my family was complicated but harmless. You know, the usual sibling rivalries and offhand comments that sting, but you brush off because that's just how family is. I've always been the calm one, the so-called success story everyone liked to mention at reunions, mostly because I built a charter business from scratch and, more recently, bought a yacht. Not a massive super yacht or anything, but big enough to turn heads at the marina and big enough to become the root of every ounce of tension that's been boiling under the surface of my family for years. My younger brother, Liam, is 32. He's charismatic, the type of guy who could charm a refund out of an airline agent or convince a teacher he forgot to turn in an essay he never wrote. Growing up, everyone adored him. My mom said he had golden boy energy. My dad used to laugh at his mistakes, call them learning moments. Me? I was the one expected to know better. I worked after school at the docks while Liam went to parties. When I graduated high school and skipped college to work full-time, my parents thought I was throwing my life away. When I finally started my own charter company, they said it was cute that I was playing businessman. It wasn't until my company started making real money that their tone changed, especially Liam's. The yacht was my first true indulgence. I named her the Mariner's Wish. She was sleek, white, and timeless. I'd saved for years, working 7-day weeks, managing maintenance calls at 2 a.m., doing every job from captain to janitor until I could afford a crew. When I took my parents and Liam out for the first ride, I expected it to be this proud family moment. Instead, Liam spent the entire time asking how much I paid for it, what the resale value was, and whether I really needed something this expensive for clients. My mom just smiled awkwardly and told him to stop teasing. But that wasn't teasing. That was the first crack. Things shifted slowly after that. Liam got engaged to a woman named Tessa, a social media influencer, if that word still means anything. Her entire personality seemed curated for the camera. She was photogenic, confident, and perpetually recording. Every conversation with her felt like a live stream I didn't agree to join. The first time we met, she told me my yacht would make killer wedding footage. I laughed politely, not realizing she was serious. From that day, every family interaction circled back to their wedding. They'd booked an oceanside resort, a sunset ceremony, drone shots, the works. And somehow, without my consent, the Mariner's Wish became part of the narrative. It started subtly. Liam would throw out lines like, "We'll do the rehearsal dinner on Noah's boat, right?" Or, "The guests will love the cruise after the vows." He never asked, it was always assumed. I corrected him gently the first few times, saying, "Hey, I can't promise that. The yacht's booked most weekends." But he brushed me off with that smirk I'd known since childhood, the one that always made me feel like the boring older brother ruining the fun. "Come on, man, it's my wedding. You can block one weekend for me." A few weeks later, my mom called. Not to ask how I was, but to help smooth things over. Apparently, Liam had told her I was acting weird about lending him the yacht. I explained that the yacht wasn't just some toy. It was my business. If I took it out of commission for a wedding weekend, that's thousands in lost revenue. My mom sighed the way only moms can. "Honey, it's your brother's big day. He's not asking you for money, just a favor. You can't put a price tag on family memories." That sentence stuck with me for days. Because that's exactly what I'd been doing for years, putting a price tag on everything, not because I was greedy, but because no one else ever understood the cost of what they asked. My time, my effort, my sanity. But I gave in a little. I said fine, they could use the yacht for some photos the day before the wedding, as long as my crew handled it. Liam agreed, too quickly. Then, about a month before the wedding, he sent me a message that still makes my jaw tighten when I think about it. It read, "Hey, bro, Tessa and I decided we'll have the ceremony on the Mariner's Wish instead. It'll be epic. Everyone's hyped. We'll start setting up Thursday." No question mark. No discussion. Just a statement of fact. When I called him, he acted surprised that I was even upset. "Dude, you're taking this too seriously. You know how much good publicity this could be for you? Half our guests have massive followings. Think of it like marketing." I told him firmly that my yacht wasn't a wedding venue and that he couldn't just set up on it. He laughed. Actually laughed. "You're joking, right? Come on, you've got plenty of money. Why are you being so stingy?" That word, stingy, cut deeper than it should have. He'd said it like my success was something I owed him, like my hard work somehow belonged to the family. For a moment, I wondered if this was about the yacht at all, or if it was about every invisible scorecard he'd been keeping since we were kids. I told him no again, and this time I didn't sugarcoat it. You can take photos on it for an hour, supervised. That's it. He hung up on me. The next week, my mom called again, voice tense. Noah, whatever you said to your brother really hurt him. He's been so stressed with wedding planning. Can't you just give him this one thing? I repeated that I couldn't. She didn't understand. She never did when it came to Liam. He could drain her savings, and she'd say he just needed a little help getting started. He could skip Christmas, and she'd say he was finding his path. Meanwhile, I'd miss one dinner because I was working, and she'd say I was becoming distant. By the time the rehearsal weekend rolled around, I decided to keep my distance. I wasn't part of the wedding party, and honestly, that was fine by me. I planned to attend quietly, congratulate them, and leave before the chaos started. The morning of the ceremony, though, I got a text from one of my employees. Hey boss, there's a team at the dock trying to load floral arrangements and equipment onto the Mariner's Wish. Said it's for a wedding. I dropped everything and drove straight to the marina. Sure enough, there were people in pastel shirts unloading boxes of decorations, speakers, even a champagne tower. And there, directing the entire operation, was Liam, wearing aviators and a smug grin. When he saw me, his smile flickered but didn't fade. Noah, perfect timing. We're almost done setting up. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. What are you doing? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Relax, he said, brushing me off. We'll put everything back exactly how it was. You won't even notice. I told him again, calmly, firmly, that he had no permission to use the yacht, that I was this close to calling security if they didn't stop. He laughed like I was being dramatic. You'd really do that? You'd ruin your brother's wedding because you can't let him borrow a boat. That word, borrow, snapped something in me. Borrow implied I'd get it back the same way. But I knew the kind of people he was inviting. Socialites, influencers, careless drinkers. My deck would end up sticky with spilled champagne, furniture broken, crew overworked, and somehow it would all be my fault for not being fun. After I forced everyone to unload, Liam stormed off, saying I'd embarrassed him in front of his friends. He didn't talk to me again before the wedding day. I thought maybe that was the end of it, that he'd cool off, realize how insane it was to plan an unauthorized wedding at my business property, and move on. But when I arrived at the resort for the ceremony, just as the sun was dipping low, painting everything gold, I felt this heaviness in the air. People whispered when I walked in. I could see Tessa giving me a tight smile from the altar, her bridesmaids all looking like they'd been instructed to avoid me. My mom hugged me stiffly, muttering, "Please don't make a scene." That was my first sign something was about to go wrong. Because when the vows started, Liam's speech wasn't the sentimental kind. He'd prepared a show, and I was about to be the unwilling punchline in front of 200 guests, among them, a judge whose presence none of us realized would change everything that followed. And it all began with the moment he walked toward me, microphone in hand, smirking like he'd finally won. Liam stood there, microphone in hand, like some performer who'd just spotted his favorite heckler in the crowd. The guests were laughing from whatever inside joke he'd just cracked, but when his eyes locked on mine, the air shifted. It was that familiar look, the same one he'd give me when we were kids right before doing something that would get me in trouble, but earn him applause. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, grinning like he was hosting a late-night show. Before we wrap up the speeches, I just want to say a few words about my brother, Noah. There was polite applause. I nodded slightly, unsure what direction this was going. The photographer turned her lens toward me, and I could feel the spotlight, figurative and literal, hitting my face. Liam paced slowly, milking the moment. Now, if you don't know Noah, let me tell you, he's the responsible one. Always has been. Straight A student, never got grounded, worked every summer while the rest of us were just trying to have fun. The crowd chuckled softly. He kept going. And now he's a big shot with his own business, a fancy yacht, a perfect life. He's the kind of guy who makes you feel like maybe you've been doing everything wrong. More laughter. But it wasn't warm. It was the uneasy kind, the kind that comes when people don't know whether they should actually be laughing. I forced a smile. My mom looked up at me from her seat, her expression caught somewhere between pride and anxiety. I could tell she didn't like where this was going either. Liam continued, "But don't let that calm face fool you. Noah's got a stubborn streak. I asked him for a tiny favor. You know, To use his boat for a few hours, no big deal. And he said no. He turned dramatically to the audience. Can you believe that? His own brother. On my wedding day, there was a mix of laughs and awkward murmurs. Some guests leaned in, clearly uncomfortable. I wanted to stand up, to say something, but I knew that'd only make it worse. He wasn't just trying to embarrass me. He wanted a reaction. He smirked when he saw me staying quiet. Guess some people just can't stand sharing the spotlight, huh? That line landed like a dart. My chest tightened. I heard Tessa's bridesmaids giggling, her father shaking his head with an exaggerated sigh. My mom whispered something to my dad, who looked like he wanted to disappear. And then, as if that wasn't enough, Liam snapped his fingers. Two groomsmen appeared from behind the band setup, dragging something covered with a white sheet. The guests turned their heads as he dramatically unveiled it. A massive framed photo of my yacht, the Mariner's Wish, printed and propped up like a billboard. This, my friends, Liam announced, is what my brother loves more than family. The laughter hit a fever pitch. Some people clapped. Others didn't know what to do. My mother's jaw dropped. I felt my face heat up, my hands trembling under the tablecloth. I could handle jokes, but this was a public ambush. I stood up then, calmly, but firmly. That's enough, Liam. He raised his eyebrows. Oh, come on, it's just a joke. No, it's not, I said. My voice was steady, even though my pulse was hammering. You've made your point. For a brief moment, silence. Then he laughed again, dismissing me with a wave. All right, I'll stop embarrassing the rich guy. Don't want him taking his boat and sailing off on us. The guests chuckled nervously, and the DJ jumped in to play some music. I sat down again, jaw tight. My mom reached for my arm and whispered, "Please, honey, don't react. It's his day." I didn't respond, because deep down, something in me had already cracked. It wasn't just the speech, it was years of being the backup, the safety net, the one expected to swallow humiliation so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. After the ceremony ended, everyone filed into the reception hall, a sprawling glass pavilion overlooking the ocean. The decorations were stunning. Tessa's aesthetic sense was flawless, I'll give her that. But I barely noticed. Every time I looked around, I saw guests whispering, glancing my way, smirking as if I really was the selfish brother who'd refused a dying wish. I headed straight to the bar. I don't drink much, but that night I ordered something strong just to keep my hands from shaking. My dad came over after a few minutes, sighing as he leaned against the counter. He went too far, he said softly. But, you know how he is. That's the problem, I muttered. Everyone knows how he is, and no one ever stops him. Dad looked at me with that weary expression I'd seen 100 times before, the one that said he wanted peace more than justice. It's his wedding, Noah. Let him have his fun. You'll forget about it in a week. I looked out across the room at Liam and Tessa, surrounded by people, laughing like nothing had happened. Yeah, I said quietly, we'll see. But forgetting was not in the cards. Because a few hours later, as the guests settled into dinner and speeches began again, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Tessa's maid of honor was talking to one of the bridesmaids near my table, unaware that I was within earshot. Oh my God, did you hear what Liam told the planner? He said they're taking the yacht tomorrow for the after-party cruise. Can you imagine? The other woman giggled. Wait, really? I thought his brother said no. He said it's fine now, she replied, shrugging. Apparently, Noah changed his mind after the ceremony. Guess he didn't want to look bad in front of everyone. I froze. Changed my mind. I hadn't even spoken to him. My mind raced. He'd found another way to do it. Just go ahead and take the yacht, assuming I wouldn't stop him in front of all these people. When I spotted him across the room, he was already watching me. That same smug expression. He raised his glass in a mock toast, like he knew I'd overheard. That was it, the breaking point. I got up and walked straight toward him. The chatter in the room dimmed a little as people noticed. We need to talk, I said, voice low. He smiled. About what? Oh, right, the boat. Don't worry, we'll take good care of it. You're not taking it, I said firmly. Not tomorrow. Not ever, without permission. He leaned in, still smiling, but his eyes sharp. You're really going to do this here? In front of everyone? You think that makes you look good? I don't care how it looks, I said. I care about boundaries. Boundaries, he repeated, laughing like it was the funniest word he'd ever heard. Noah, you've got everything. A business, a boat, money pouring in. All I wanted was one weekend. You can't even do that? You know what? Maybe Mom's right. You've changed. My mother, now standing nearby, said softly, Liam, please. But he cut her off. No, Mom, he needs to hear this. He acts like he's above everyone now. Like we're all supposed to thank him for existing. People were turning their heads now, conversations dying down. Even the band stopped playing. I kept my voice calm, even though my insides were shaking. I've worked for everything I have. You don't get to take it because you think you're owed something. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, but not enough that the people nearest us couldn't hear. You think you're better than me. You always have. I never thought that, I said. But maybe I should have. That did it. His smile vanished. In an instant, his hand shot out. Before I could react, the slap landed hard across my face. The sound echoed louder than the music had moments ago. For a moment, nobody moved. Glasses froze midair, forks hung over plates. I felt the sting spreading across my cheek, but the pain barely registered. It was the shock, the humiliation that hit first. Then came the murmurs. Gasps. Someone said, "Oh my God." My mother shouted his name. Liam. But he just stood there, breathing heavily, eyes wild. You deserve that, he hissed. You've been embarrassing me all week. I didn't speak. I just stared at him. Something in me went cold, quiet. Before I could respond, an older man from one of the front tables stood up. I'd seen him earlier, sitting with a group of local officials. A family friend of Tessa's father, I thought. But now, the look on his face was firm, commanding. That's enough, he said. His voice carried across the room with authority. You've crossed a line. The crowd parted slightly as he approached us. I saw Tessa's face pale. Her father rushed over too, whispering something frantic. The man turned to me, extending his hand. Mr. Everett, are you all right? I'm fine, I said automatically, though my cheek burned red. The man looked around the room, his tone shifting. For anyone wondering, I'm Judge Harold Miller. And what I just witnessed was assault, plain and simple. The air sucked out of the room. Liam blinked, his confidence draining. Oh, come on, he stammered. It was just, the judge raised a hand. Not another word. You can humiliate your brother all you like, but laying a hand on him in front of witnesses? That's something else entirely. Tessa looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. My mom covered her mouth. The guests were silent. And me? I just stood there, pulse steady now, watching Liam's face crumble as he realized, for the first time in his life, that charm wouldn't save him this time. That moment, the collective silence, the judgmental stares, the weight of every suppressed emotion finally breaking through. That's when everything truly changed. Because what happened after that wasn't just fallout. It was the start of something I never thought I'd do, something I'd spent years avoiding, standing up, not just for myself, but for the principle I'd been forced to swallow my whole life. The night of Liam's wedding ended in chaos. After the judge's words, everything crumbled in slow motion. The DJ froze mid-song. Guests whispered like they'd witnessed something forbidden, and Tessa's perfect aesthetic, candles flickering, champagne glasses glinting, suddenly looked like the set of a crime scene. My cheeks still throbbed from the slap, but it was the humiliation that burned deeper. I could feel every stare, every camera phone, every gasp echoing in my skull. My mother cried quietly near the buffet table. My father stood between me and Liam like a man trying to hold back a storm with his bare hands. Tessa was whispering furiously to her new husband, her manicured hand gripping his sleeve as if she could physically pull him back into composure. But Liam, red-faced and trembling, looked more like a boy caught stealing cookies than a groom. He mumbled something like, "It was a joke," or "He provoked me," but no one cared anymore. The judge's voice had sliced through all his excuses. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out. Outside, the air was thick with salt and humidity. I could hear the ocean beyond the resort's manicured lawn, the rhythmic crash of waves somehow mocking the noise behind me. I stood there for a minute, my hand pressed against the side of my face, trying to steady my breathing. For years, I'd been the one to avoid scenes, to keep peace, even when I was the only one bleeding for it. But now the world had seen it. The slap, the imbalance, the truth. A few people followed me out, mostly out of concern, or maybe curiosity. One of my employees, Mark, had been invited since he handled our charter logistics. He came up quietly, offered me his jacket, and said, "You handled that better than anyone could have." I gave him a small nod. Thanks, Mark. Just make sure no one touches the yacht tomorrow, okay? He understood immediately. That night, I didn't go home. I drove down to the marina, parked by the Mariner's Wish, and sat in silence for hours. The deck lights reflected on the dark water, calm and perfect, completely untouched by the storm I'd just left behind. I climbed aboard and sat by the wheel, feeling the hum of the generator through the floorboards. The yacht had always been my symbol of freedom, my escape. But in that moment, it felt like the only place I had left. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of messages. Some from family, some from friends, a few from people I barely knew who had seen clips circulating online. Yes, someone had filmed it. Of course they had. The wedding slap was already making rounds on social media, though thankfully not viral enough to hit the news cycle. Still, it was humiliating to know strangers were watching that moment like a scene from a reality show. Liam texted me once. Just once. We need to talk. You made me look bad. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. He still didn't get it. For the next few weeks, I kept to myself. My mom tried calling daily at first, her tone a mix of guilt and denial. You know your brother didn't mean it, she said once. He's under so much pressure. I told her, calmly, that what he did wasn't about pressure, it was about entitlement. She sighed, said she didn't want to take sides, and hung up. My dad, on the other hand, didn't call at all. Not for almost a month. When he finally did, his voice was weary. Your mother's upset, he said. She thinks the family's falling apart. I replied, it's been falling apart for years. It just finally hit the floor. Business was the only thing that kept me grounded. My company had always been steady, but after the wedding fiasco, something changed in me. I started working harder, not out of anger, but clarity. The distraction helped, sure, but it also reminded me why I'd built this life. Every early morning, every sleepless night, every dollar saved, it had all been mine. Not handed down, not borrowed. Mine. A few clients had heard about the wedding incident and reached out with sympathy. One, an older woman who owned a real estate firm, said something that stuck with me. You learn who your family is the day they realize they can't control you. That sentence echoed in my head for weeks. I focused on rebuilding, not my reputation, but my peace. I upgraded my yacht's booking system, expanded routes, and hired 2 new crew members. Mark took on more responsibility, proving himself reliable beyond expectation. By summer, we were booked months in advance. Ironically, the same social circle that once whispered about me now wanted to host parties on my yacht. I declined most of them. I wasn't ready to let people like that back into my space. As for Liam and Tessa, they went quiet. I heard bits and pieces through my mother. Their honeymoon got postponed because of stress, which was her delicate way of saying they were fighting. My father hinted that Tessa's parents weren't happy with the scene at the wedding. Apparently, the judge, Harold Miller, had pulled Tessa's father aside afterward and strongly advised that Liam get professional help for his anger issues before there were more serious consequences. At first, I thought that would be enough. That maybe, finally, Liam would take a step back and realize he'd gone too far. But that's not how people like him work. When entitlement meets embarrassment, it doesn't evolve, it festers. A few months later, I got served papers. He was suing me. The claim was absurd: defamation and business damages. According to the filing, my refusal to honor an agreed-upon arrangement for the yacht had caused him to suffer emotional distress and public embarrassment. He even claimed the judge's public reprimand had damaged his professional reputation. For the record, Liam didn't have much of a profession beyond occasional real estate stints and influencer partnerships through Tessa. When I read the documents, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly Liam. When he couldn't get what he wanted through charm or guilt, he tried force. I hired a lawyer, of course, a good one. And during that process, I learned something important. Sometimes the worst betrayals can become your sharpest clarity. The lawsuit wasn't just petty, it was self-destructive. Every piece of evidence his attorney tried to use crumbled under basic scrutiny. There were witnesses, hundreds of them, who saw the slap. There were videos. There was even Judge Miller's statement, should it come to that. But while the case was being processed, my mother's calls took on a new tone. Can't you just settle? She pleaded. He's your brother. He stopped being just my brother when he slapped me in front of 200 people, I said quietly. And when he tried to take what I built. She didn't answer. The months dragged on. The legal process was slow, but my company thrived. For the first time, I started traveling for myself. No clients, no family obligations. Just me. I spent a week sailing along the Croatian coast, anchoring at small islands where no one knew who I was. The sun, the quiet, the solitude, it was healing. During one of those evenings, anchored near a tiny village, I sat on deck watching the horizon bleed orange into purple. I realized something simple but powerful. I didn't know anyone an explanation for my boundaries. The guilt I'd carried for years. Every time I said no, every time I didn't play the role of responsible big brother, it wasn't mine to bear. By the time I returned home, I was different. Not harder exactly, just less willing to shrink. The court eventually dismissed Liam's case. Frivolous and baseless, the judge said. The same Judge Miller, in fact, who had witnessed the incident firsthand. When the verdict came through, my lawyer smiled and said, "He picked the wrong brother to provoke." But even in victory, the aftermath hurt. My mom didn't celebrate. She cried, said things like, "Families shouldn't fight in court." My dad stayed neutral as always. And Liam, well, he vanished from family gatherings. Rumor was, he and Tessa had separated temporarily. Apparently, she'd grown tired of his bad press. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it, didn't talk about it. I just went back to my life, quietly, deliberately. The silence was its own kind of peace. It took nearly a year for my parents to truly understand the depth of what had happened. My mom came to visit one afternoon, unannounced. She stood on my dock, looking small against the backdrop of the yacht. "I didn't realize," she said finally. "I kept thinking it would all blow over. But you were right. We let him get away with too much." I nodded. "You wanted to protect him." "I wanted to protect both of you," she said softly. "But I didn't see what it was costing you." It was the first real apology I'd heard from anyone in my family. And maybe that was enough for now. Over time, things settled. My business expanded into a second yacht, then a third. I started hosting charity sales for underprivileged kids, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. Each time I watched those kids' faces light up on the open sea, I remembered why I loved this work in the first place. It wasn't about the money or the luxury. It was about freedom, purpose, and the sense that I'd built something meaningful. Then, one evening about 18 months after the wedding, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. When I picked up, the voice on the other end froze me in place. It was Liam. His tone wasn't angry this time. It was tired, almost desperate. "Hey, Noah," he said quietly. "We need to talk. It's about Mom and Dad." And just like that, the peace I'd worked so hard for began to ripple again. When I heard Liam's voice on the phone that night, it was like hearing a ghost. 18 months of silence. And suddenly he was calling as if nothing had happened. My first instinct was to hang up. But something in his tone, tired, almost hollow, made me pause. "What about Mom and Dad?" I asked cautiously. He hesitated. "They're not doing great. Financially, I mean. Dad's business took a hit after one of his partners backed out, and Mom had to cover some of his debts. They're behind on the mortgage." I leaned back in my chair, the faint hum of the marina outside my window filling the silence. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because I'm helping them as much as I can," he said quickly, "but I can't cover everything alone." I thought maybe you could, there it was. The real reason. Not reconciliation. Not guilt. Just another favor wrapped in family guilt. "I've already helped them before," I said flatly. "They never told me about any of this." "They didn't want to bother you," he replied, and there was a flicker of irritation in his voice, the same tone he used when things didn't go his way. "Look, Noah, I know we've had our differences, but they need help. You've got the means." "Liam," I said quietly, "you sued me." He went silent. The weight of that truth hung between us. Finally, he said, "I made a mistake, okay? I was angry. I thought you were trying to humiliate me. But I've changed." I didn't believe that for a second, but I also knew better than to argue. "I'll think about it," I said, and hung up. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt curious. Something about the timing, the sudden appeal to emotion, didn't sit right. So the next day, I drove to my parents' house. The neighborhood was quieter than I remembered. Their garden, once perfectly maintained by my mom, was overgrown. My dad's car had a "for sale" sign on the windshield. When I knocked, my mom opened the door looking thinner, older, but still warm in that familiar, conflicted way. "Noah," she said softly, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to say my name. Inside, Dad was at the dining table surrounded by papers. He gave me a tired smile. I was hoping you'd stop by. We talked for hours. About his business, about the economy, about how he'd trusted a longtime partner who pulled out last minute, leaving him with debt he couldn't shoulder. They'd been scraping by, avoiding telling me because you had enough on your plate. I believed them, but something still didn't add up. When I asked how much they owed, Dad said a number that made my stomach twist, not because it was too high, but because it was oddly specific. It matched, almost exactly, the cost of the yacht Liam had once tried to use for his wedding. That night, after I left, I stopped by a quiet cafe near the harbor and pulled out my laptop. A few quick searches confirmed my suspicion. A month earlier, Liam had tried and failed to start a luxury event company. His name was still attached to a series of unpaid invoices, and his investors had reportedly backed out after some bad publicity. It clicked all at once. He wasn't just trying to help my parents. He was using them as leverage. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me focused. I knew Liam well enough to predict his moves. He'd try to guilt me into giving him money for the family, then redirect it into his own failing venture. He'd twist it into a story about helping everyone. He always needed to be the hero, and heroes like him always built their image on someone else's back. So, I decided to give him what he wanted on my terms. Over the next few days, I quietly gathered information. I spoke to Dad's former business partner, to a few mutual contacts who'd worked with Liam, and to Mark, my right-hand man at the marina. By the end of the week, I had a clear picture. Liam's company had gone under. He'd borrowed heavily to make it look successful, betting that his name and connections would attract investors. When that failed, he turned to the only thing that had ever saved him before: family. But this time, he'd picked the wrong version of me. The old me would have written a check just to make the tension disappear. But the new me, the one forged from humiliation and rebuilding, wanted something else. I wanted to show him what accountability looked like. I began laying the groundwork. Step 1. I called my parents and told them I'd help pay off their mortgage, directly, through the bank, not through Liam. My mom protested at first, saying it would hurt his feelings. I told her gently, it's not about his feelings. It's about doing this right. She didn't argue after that. Step 2. I invited Liam to meet in person. I made it sound like a truce. We met at a waterfront restaurant downtown. He showed up in designer sunglasses, all smiles, as if none of the past year had happened. "Man, you look good," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Glad we can finally talk like adults." I gave him a polite nod. Same here. Over dinner, he played his role perfectly: concerned brother, responsible son, misunderstood victim. He talked about helping mom and dad, about how he'd been humbled and was finally focusing on doing the right thing. It was an impressive performance. Then he said it. The real pitch. "I've been thinking," he began, swirling his wine. "You and I could actually work together. Combine our resources. I've got contacts in the events world, and you've got the boats. We could run luxury wedding charters. Make a fortune." There it was, the hook. I hid my satisfaction behind a thoughtful expression. "That's an interesting idea," I said. "How about you send me a proposal? Something on paper." He grinned. "I knew you'd see it." After that night, I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. Then, sure enough, he sent a long, detailed business plan. It was slick, professional looking, even had fake projections showing projected annual revenue and mutual equity. But buried in the fine print was exactly what I expected: a clause giving him 51% ownership of the company for management purposes. That was all I needed. I printed every page, highlighted every inconsistency, and forwarded it to my lawyer, along with the previous lawsuit documents, copies of his unpaid debts, and records of his recent company shutdown. "Prepare a contingency file," I told her. "I don't plan to use it yet, but I want it ready." The next part of my plan wasn't legal, it was psychological. I wanted him to feel like everything was going his way, just long enough to build confidence. So I agreed to his proposal in principle. We met twice more, discussing logistics, pricing models, even branding. He bragged to everyone, including my parents, that we were rebuilding the Everett legacy. I let him. In fact, I even told my marketing assistant to design mock-ups of the company's new brand, Everett Luxury Charters. I made sure Liam's name was on the early drafts, just so he'd feel like it was real. He started posting about it online, calling it a new beginning. The post got traction. Investors started sniffing around again. He had no idea the trap was already closing. Meanwhile, I had been quietly setting up an entirely separate venture under my company's existing structure. A genuine expansion, real boats, real clients, real contracts. It shared almost the same branding as the fake one Liam thought he controlled. When the time came, the confusion between the two names would be enough to expose just how messy his operation really was. But that was only part of it. The final piece was something I'd been planning since the day he slapped me, something poetic. There was a high-profile charity gala coming up, hosted by several of my company's biggest clients. I'd been invited to sponsor the event, and I knew Liam was attending too, through Tessa, who'd been clawing her way back into influencer circles after their split and reunion. The theme? Family, integrity, and redemption. I couldn't have scripted it better. That night would be my stage. Not for revenge in the cruel sense, but for something far more satisfying, for truth, for exposure, and for the calm, deliberate reckoning he'd never see coming. Because while he'd spent the past year chasing appearances, I'd been rebuilding something real, my life, my business, my peace. And now, for the first time, I wasn't reacting to him. I was leading. And as I stood on my yacht the evening before the gala, watching the reflection of city lights ripple across the water, I realized something almost funny. Revenge didn't feel like rage anymore. It felt like justice, dressed in patience. I smiled to myself, adjusted my cufflinks, and whispered into the night, "Tomorrow, little brother, you finally get what you asked for." The night of the charity gala shimmered with polished perfection, crystal chandeliers, velvet suits, and the faint sound of live jazz floating through the ballroom. It was one of those events where everyone smiled too much and no one said what they meant. I'd been to plenty before, but this one felt different. It wasn't just another night of networking or fundraising. It was the night everything came full circle. I arrived early, as I always do, calm and collected. My company's name was proudly displayed on the sponsor board, Everett Marine Enterprises, positioned directly beside the gala's banner: family, integrity, and redemption. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. Liam arrived about 30 minutes later. I spotted him across the room, all charm and confidence, shaking hands and laughing too loudly. He looked exactly how he always did before a crash, untouchable, invincible, oblivious. Tessa trailed behind him in a glittering silver dress, her expression carefully neutral. I doubted she knew what was coming, but judging by the distance between them, their reunion was already showing cracks. He saw me before I could approach. His grin widened. "Noah, there he is, my brilliant partner." A few nearby guests turned their heads at that. I smiled politely, letting him take the bait. "Good evening, Liam," I said, offering a handshake I didn't mean. "Everything's coming together nicely, I see." "Absolutely," he said, beaming. "This event's crawling with investors. I've already spoken to 2 who want to get in early on Everett luxury charters. Told you this idea had legs." "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It certainly does." He had no clue that the name he'd been using, the one he'd been promoting online, the one splashed across his marketing posts, had been legally trademarked by me weeks ago. Nor did he know that every potential investor he'd contacted had already received quiet updates from my office clarifying the real ownership of the brand. This night wasn't about humiliating him in the same way he'd done to me, not in front of 200 people with a slap. My revenge was quieter, sharper, and infinitely more permanent. As the evening went on, speeches began. The gala's host, a local philanthropist, gave the usual talk about community and values. Then came the donor acknowledgments. When my name was announced, I stood, gave a polite nod, and prepared for the next step. But first, Liam had to make his move. He'd arranged, apparently, to take the stage later in the night. A surprise announcement, he'd told people. I knew exactly what it was. He was going to reveal our new business partnership to the audience, riding on my credibility to resurrect his name. The timing was perfect, right after dessert, when everyone's guard was down and champagne was flowing. I didn't stop him. When the MC called his name, Liam strode to the podium like he was walking onto a movie set. The lights caught him perfectly. The room went quiet. "Good evening, everyone," he began, all smooth confidence. "Tonight isn't just about charity, it's about rebirth. About second chances." I had to admit, he was good. His voice was steady, his delivery flawless. If I didn't know better, I'd believe him myself. He went on for a few minutes, talking about family values, collaboration, and the importance of forgiveness. Then he hit the crescendo. "I'm proud to announce," he said, gesturing toward me, "a brand new venture, Everett Luxury Charters, a partnership between my brother Noah and myself. A fusion of vision, craftsmanship, and heart." There was applause. Cameras flashed. Investors smiled approvingly. He was in his element again, adored, admired, untouchable. Until the host spoke up. "Ah, yes," the host said, smiling politely. "That's quite an announcement, Mr. Everett. And a perfect segue, actually, into our next scheduled presentation from Mr. Noah Everett himself, who's here to tell us about his company's expansion plans." The applause faded slightly, replaced with a subtle buzz of curiosity. Liam froze for half a second, unsure whether to step aside or stay. I walked toward the stage slowly, the sound of my footsteps echoing across the marble. When I reached the podium, I gave my brother a calm, measured look, the kind that only someone with complete control can give. "Thank you, Liam," I said, my voice steady through the microphone. "It's always nice to see your enthusiasm. But I should clarify something important before any misunderstandings spread." The audience hushed. Cameras stayed fixed on us. Liam's smile faltered just a little. I turned to the crowd. "My company, Everett Marine Enterprises, has indeed been expanding, but not with outside partners." I paused, letting that sink in. "We recently launched Everett Charter Group, a registered and trademarked division under our umbrella, focused on high-end yacht experiences and maritime events. I've heard there's been some confusion regarding similar names floating around." I turned slightly toward Liam, my tone still friendly but deliberate. "Just to be perfectly clear, any use of the term Everett Luxury Charters is unauthorized. My legal team is already handling the matter." A wave of whispers rippled through the audience. Liam's color drained. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, but the mic caught it anyway. "What are you doing?" I didn't look at him. "Correcting misinformation," I said, still addressing the crowd. I went on to thank the gala organizers, outline my company's real charity initiatives, including the free sailing programs for underprivileged kids, and ended with a brief statement about integrity in business. By the time I stepped away, the applause was thunderous, polite, and unmistakably pointed. Liam stood there frozen, microphone in hand, unsure what to say. Tessa looked mortified. One of the investors he'd been charming earlier quietly slipped away from their table. He tried to recover, mumbling something about a misunderstanding, but the damage was already done. The host quickly moved on to the next segment, and the band started playing. For the first time in years, Liam didn't